This is the Founders Catalyst. Hello there, and welcome back into the Founders Catalyst. My voice was especially podcasty just now. I just went right into my voice. I noticed the change in my voice there, mate, like the moment I started recording. So
the Founders Catalyst.
That's like a little bit too much of my drama background kicked in there. I apologize. But it's funny, we were just chatting, and again, this is the second time in the short history of this podcast where little old Lee has slept in, and we've been delayed a little bit. But it is for jet lag. I want to start there. I want to start right there. You were just saying before, I was like, no, let's just press record instead of having this conversation without record on. But you woke up at 6 and then you fell back asleep. It's such a normal thing to do, sadly, when it comes to jet lag. Jet lag will just pull you right back into sleep.
So I went to sleep at 8.
Yeah.
I woke up at 1. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go back to sleep. Went to sleep. Woke up at 6, ready and raring to go. My dog was like, feed me. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to have another 15 minutes. Quick cuddle with the wife. She's going away for a week to go and see her family. And immediately back to sleep again. And then I woke up at 7:05 for our 7 o'clock podcast appearance.
That's right.
And texted you one word.
You did. It was a bad word. It started with the letter F and it had an exclamation point at the end of it. And it rhymes with duck. So the fact of the matter is that we're here and we're ready to go. And something that we were talking about before we pressed record, which was just an absolute gem, based on some things I've had going on recently, but then just your insight to build upon it was such a fabulous topic for us to talk about. And in its most cleanest form, the way I would say this is that as founders, as leaders, our vision of normal is different to most of society. And when we spend a little bit more time on that, as we will here today, we have an opportunity to, firstly, I think, start assessing things from our own perspective, how we see things. But where I'm excited to potentially go to, and I'll have a story to share with you all about this that I just shared with Lee, it's how we're then received by others too. It's the outside in as well. So it's not about just how we see it and the importance of us acknowledging that we see it differently, but then the fact that that is being received in a different capacity as well. So I want to start really, and this is one of those moments where I know I'm setting myself up for you to say, well, why don't we take a step back? But I want to start from our perspective as former athletes, former coaches. You know, that's where we've both learned this lesson from that perspective. So talk to the listeners, Lee, a little bit about just your background when you think about how this mindset, how this perspective has come up in that world from your time in athletics.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where this is going to go, Steve. And I like it when, sometimes we really prepare for these and then sometimes we're like, 5-minute chat before the podcast. Oh, this seems like a prevalent thing to talk about. Where does it show up? It shows up in a bunch of things. So you're going to get to one of these things in a minute, and we'll talk more about that when you share your story. But it definitely shows up in how we handle setbacks. So injuries, life setbacks, how we think of it, and how also the rest of the world responds to it. So when I've had operations on my shoulder, or I crashed in 2010, and I think this is actually a really relevant story because it's also emotionally very pivotal for me. Yeah. So I, as a younger person, believed I was invincible. I'd crashed my bike racing a bunch of times, done rugby, done all the sports and never really got injured. And then in 2010, at the age of 37, it was a week before the National Masters Championships, of which I was the defending champion. I was in unbelievably good shape, really trained very hard. I crashed, and I crashed very badly, and I broke every bone in my shoulder pretty much. At the race, I tried to get back on my bike and do the rerun of the race. I couldn't grip the bars, and luckily there was a friend of mine who's a doctor in the crowd who immediately forbade me from getting back on the bike and racing, to which we had an argument, like quite an argument. He's like, "You're not racing." I'm like, "Yes, I am."
Yeah, rationality went with your shoulder bones by the sounds of it.
Oh, yeah. You know, adrenaline was fully pumping. I was ready to go. So then they took me to the hospital, had an x-ray, didn't find anything on the x-ray. And I'm like, "Oh, no, this is definitely not right." And they, "Yeah, but you're not in that much pain." I'm like, "Yeah, but it doesn't feel right." The doctor examined me, immediately dislocated my shoulder when he examined my range of motion. That shouldn't happen. That's really bad. He then ran away because I swore at him and I had to put my own shoulder back in. I then drove home for 4 hours with no painkillers.
Wow.
I then went for a bike ride the next day, and then I saw the orthopedic surgeon where I lived and had a CT scan and MRI, and then he was like, "Oh, you're not going to be competing next week at the national championships. Here's all the different bones that you've broken, and here's the 2 surgeries that we're going to have to do to put your shoulder back together again." And it was the first time in my life that I was truly vulnerable. I didn't know what to do. And I asked a friend of mine to give me a lift to the hospital. And he said, "Well, why don't you just get a cab, mate? It's 1 mile down the road." And this was for my first surgery. And what I didn't realise when I was asking him was, I wasn't asking him for a lift to the hospital. I was saying, "Can you come hold my hand, because I'm scared and I don't know how to deal with that, because I've never really been this scared before."
Right.
And, you know, most people would know to be afraid of having an operation.
Yeah.
Most people would know that that was a really big deal. And when it first happened, I hadn't made that emotional shift. I even picked when I had the operation, and picked when both my girlfriend and my mum, my 2 closest support network, were both on holiday. And I just thought, I'm going to go and have this major surgery by myself, going to come back and look after myself. I didn't really have any inkling of that. So I think that's one way it's played out for me, is I've underestimated the support that I need because I'm so resilient.
Yeah.
Well,
I was just going to say something I'm hearing there as well that I think is important to mention is our sense of reality, how we can, and that was where I started this year. It's like, how can we look at this first from just our perspective before we start looking at how it's maybe received by others? Like we create what is a very unusual, inaccurate sense of reality. Now that can really serve us, like that fitness that you were at before the injury. It's because of that false reality that you create for yourself as a high performer that allows you to push those limits and get to that point. And I relate with that so much. Every time I talk about my swimming with my kids and my wife, it's like it was like a past life. It really was. Like, it was as though not only a page turned or a chapter turned, it was like it was a whole different book. Like, the book was completely different. The character was different. Everything about it was different. And that sense of reality that we create for ourselves to demand the most out of ourselves, again, it serves us to a point until reality really comes around and serves as a dose of what you experienced there. And now you have to actually find a way to come back in to the normalcy of life. What people typically would say is like, "Oh, I'm getting surgery. Why wouldn't I tell anyone close to me, and ideally line that schedule up with their schedule so they can support me," as opposed to, "Oh no, this individualistic approach that I've had to everything I've done up to this point." And by the way, all of this is from my own perspective too. Similar stories, not to that extent in terms of the severity of the injury when I was an athlete, but
that's
that's
a good word though, Steve. That individualistic.
Yeah,
I think that's part of it. It's like and I'm speaking for both of us, you know, I'm a high performer. I will be okay. I will get it done.
Right.
And that's something that we both see in the founders that we work with. So, you know, my clients, especially, that is actually the Achilles heel for them. Typically, when people come to me, their company is scaling rapidly. They have a good product or service. They're doing well. And the thing that's holding them back is them. It's either their leadership level, their leadership knowledge, or more typically it's, I want to be involved in everything and I can't be involved in everything anymore, and I can't trust people, and I need to let go and I need to trust people, and the only person I really trust is me. And it's that warped of other people are more comfortable relying on other people. They're more comfortable asking for help. They're more comfortable saying, I'm struggling. Whereas often we don't even know we're struggling because we're just so capable. And this is where, when we were talking about this before we started, I was kind of curious where this is going to go of. For me, there's actually a huge amount of loneliness in this world.
Yeah.
My standards are so high, other people can't understand how high my standards are. And I'm seeking for people that see the world in that way and that have the same standards and want to do things to the same level and want to have the same impact. At 45 and 46, I was training as a full-time athlete while I was still running the national team program, because I was competing with the athletes that I coached and expecting to beat them, being twice their age. Yeah. Because I couldn't comprehend that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew that they, you know, the younger, they're going to eventually beat me, but they were my targets. That's not normal. That's not normal for a 45-year-old to think I can and should compete with 20-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah, and again, had you been comparing yourself to people in the same age group, chances are you wouldn't have been pushing yourself as hard and demanding as much as out of yourself. And again, this is why what allows us now to bring it to the founders and the leaders listening to this is that chances are a lot of the time when we get into this headspace, a big catalyst behind allowing us to get there is some sort of sense of fault, like inaccurate or incorrect comparison. Like we're comparing ourselves to something that's actually not serving us. It could be somebody that's doing what we're doing, but it could also just be a vision that we have. It could just be an idea that we have. This is where I get in my own trouble. You talk about that loneliness, which I appreciate you framing it that way. That's where I feel a lot of my greatest resistance in this work that I do today as I build my business specifically, is that sometimes as I conceptualize what I know I want from this business and who I want to be working with, I almost get in a battle with that future version of myself and get frustrated that the version I am today is not there. But it's like, well, Steve, you're comparing yourself to something that's not even real. Like that's not even, and worse, like further still, you're allowing that version of yourself that doesn't exist to almost judge where you are today, as opposed to motivate and encourage you and inspire you and support you. Like, how is this helpful? This isn't helpful, you know? And I'm aware of it. I've done the work to know that, but does that mean I still don't fall into that from time to time? Of course. And I'd like to think any founder listening to this specifically can hear this and say, yep, I'm all too aware of, you know, business ABC over here that's doing a similar thing to what we're providing, and they're 10x of what we are. And I'm not even paying attention to the fact that they've been doing it for 20 years longer than we have. I just want to be where they're at. But what is that doing to you? And then to take us now to the second part of this as well, what's that doing to the folks that the more and more folks that you're slowly introducing to this ship that you're sailing? Like, are they coming on feeling part of the team and feeling part of the vision? Or are you so far ahead on this path and so focused on what's out there that you can't even see, that you're forgetting about, oh, I need to be bringing these people with me. I need to be bringing these people into this vision of mine and making it a shared sense of normalcy, as opposed to this wildly inaccurate version of normalcy that I have, while everybody else is back here, you know, operating in reality.
Yeah, there's two things I see and I've experienced. So one, coming back to the loneliness, is nobody else gets it. Mm-hmm. I can see it. I can see what needs to be done here. When I think of the national team program for USA Cycling, I had this clear vision of exactly what it was going to look like. I'd written out the times I thought our team would need to do for the next 4 Olympic cycles to be competitive, like the progression of the sport, where I thought we could get better, what we needed to do. And I shared it with people and I thought I was crazy. And it was like, we're never going to be that good. And I'm like, of course we are. There's other teams in the world that good, so why are we not going to be? I'm just asking us to be a little bit better than them in 4 years' time, because that's what's going to be needed to win. Mm-hmm. And I would hear things like, you'll never get the sponsorship money. Well, of course we will. And there was just this loneliness of I was the only person who could see it, who could really feel it and taste it and knew it was possible. Everyone else thought it wasn't possible. Yeah, I'm looking around going, well, other nations are doing this. Of course we can.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I often see with founders and high performers is this inability to stop, pause, and recognize what they have achieved. Yeah. Because our bar is so high and because our version of normal is so abnormal, we struggle to stop and go, that was good. I've struggled my entire life with this.
Yeah.
Everything was a stepping stone. I'm only ever interested in the biggest competition, the biggest prize. When I run my real estate agency, by the time I sold it, we were the third largest real estate agency in the city of Brighton and Hove, which had 100 real estate agencies. And we were number 3. And we were at the volume end of the market that specialised on apartments. We were absolutely maximising what we could do, and it still didn't feel enough.
Yeah, you were just sat there being like, no one remembers bronze medalists. What is this?
And I did that in 5 years, and I was the youngest owner of a real estate business in the city.
Right.
And we were in the top 3, and it didn't feel enough. And this is what I see with founders. As you said, they're looking at companies that have been around for 20, 30, 40, 50 years longer than they have. And they go, why aren't we making as much money as them? And they've been in business 3 years. Right. And we need that. That's a part of human evolution that took us out to go and expand and to find new places to eat and conquer new lands. This kind of edge, this leadership that not everybody has. It is a rarity. And that's why if you're listening to this, you probably resonate with this, because that's who we want to speak to. That's the rarefied air that we work in. And the issue with this is the fulfillment piece that goes with it, because it's so hard for us to stop and go, actually, that was really good. What I've just done, what we've just achieved as a team, especially. And I think now we're moving to this impact on, as you say, the other people around us. The big impact I see is so many leaders struggling to say, that is actually really good. Thank you for what you've done there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I want to use this as just a update for those that don't necessarily follow me on socials and all that kind of thing. When this comes out, we're recording the first week of June. I think it's coming out the second week of June, and that'll put me right around 4 weeks after a hip scope operation that I had for a torn labrum in my hip. And I'd had this torn labrum. I didn't know it was as bad as it was most of the time until I really got the scans that I needed, etc. But I'd had signs of this injury for the better part of 18 months. And in fact, the initial signs of it came when I was training for a half marathon. So there's a very good chance that I ran a half marathon with a torn labrum in my hip. I say very good chance. I know that I did. I ran a half marathon with a torn labrum in my hip.
You lost me at running a half marathon. God, no.
Yeah, I know. You're not interested. You're like, what is this? What is it? How do you spell marathon? What is that word? Yeah. So the fact of the matter was, it was a surgery that was going to take me out in terms of being able to get up around on my feet for the better part of 3 to 4 weeks. One of the first things the surgeon told me is like, you won't be able to drive for a month. And I live in a place where I need to be driving. I have a business where I need to be driving. And so immediately I was like, okay, well, looks like my wife's going to have to take 4 weeks off work to ensure that I can get to places and do things. And turns out as well that the kids' school was going to be down for the summer as well, and they're going to be starting summer stuff, and she's going to be driving them around, so she turns into this 24/7 taxi for our family. And here I am all the while just sat in bed, unable to contribute, unable to do what I like to do. And a big part of my personality that I've developed, an identity that I've developed in the last 3 years especially, is really being the husband and being the father figure in this household that I strive to be present, to be involved, to do all these things. And to have to say, can't do that for 4 weeks, can't show up in your business as much as you'd like for 4 weeks. And as I've come to find out in the last 3 or 4 weeks as well, being able to have my typical routine has just gone completely out the window as well. And as you know, and we're very similar like this, we have routines for a reason. We need our routine. And when we don't, we just don't feel right. And so it's all, there it is. He's had his drink, folks. He's had his drink, as he always has.
I have the same smoothie every day and have done since 2018.
That's it. And so What I ended up doing though was, and I think this is a really nice example of how you can you can look at this from both perspectives. So I used these traits that I have of, I do see the world differently to most as a high performer. And so what I did is, about 9 months before I was thinking, okay, I probably need to get this surgery, I started doing all the prehab, building up all this strength around the hip, and took all this, progress and strengthening that I'd done over that time into the surgery, so that the turnaround after the surgery would be as efficient and as successful as possible. And again, here I am, I assume that's what people do. You want to bounce back from the surgery, right? And I was telling this story with Lee just before we pressed record, and once I was given the green light to get back in the gym at week 2 to start getting my heart rate up a little bit more, I was on a recumbent bike in the gym, and a gentleman comes up to me who speaks to me on and off at the gym, and he says, I thought you'd had a hip surgery, and I had this brace on me at the time. And it was like, well, clearly I still had the hip surgery, mate. It's right here. But he's like, you seem to be doing a lot more than most would be doing. I said, well, simply put, heading into this, I did about 9 months of preparation to ensure that I would bounce back as quickly as possible, so that I could be on this recumbent bike, getting my heart rate up and doing what I'm doing right now, just so I could get back to life as quickly as possible. And it was like his brain broke in that moment. It was like he gave me this look that I don't really see in human beings. It was like he couldn't process why a person would think about that for as many months as I thought about it, going into something like this hip scope surgery. And I was looking at it from both perspectives. And this is what I hope the message of this story can come through for any founders listening to this, is that our sense of normalcy can be so effective for us as individuals to do things that few, if any, are willing to do. Nobody else will understand why we do it and how we do it, etc. However, we can then use that skill to say, how can I use this to an advantage to those that are supporting me and this business, let's say, just to bring this back now to business. And a big part of my why behind that work was so that I could bounce back and be the leader for my family, give my wife a little bit more of a break earlier than most would probably be able to give their spouse, be more present. I went to my daughter's swimming lesson last night at less than 3 weeks post-surgery. Like, you're not really supposed to be out the house, but I was fine. And a big part of my why for doing that work was so that I could be that supportive figure to my daughter and be still seen as this guy that I pride myself on being seen through her eyes. For me, that's the beauty of this, is that we can actually use it as a superpower. Like, sometimes it can be our kryptonite, and we've used that term a couple times already, but it could also be our superpower if we can somehow shift it and say, how do I use this trait of mine to the benefit of those around me, and potentially even start to let them in and better understand why I approach things this way, why I look at things this way as well.
Yeah, and this is the, as I said, the Achilles heel I see with a lot of founders is they can't understand why other people can't see the world the way they do. Mm-hmm. I've got one founder in particular, and we'll do our coaching sessions, and he's just angry that people cannot understand in his organization that he meets the opportunities that he can see, the way that he's seeing the world. And that's why, to me, it feels lonely. You have these conversations with people and they look at you blankly and, yep. I've had a broken ankle that was misdiagnosed for 18 months, and it kept getting misdiagnosed because I'm walking into the doctor's surgery and I'm walking in and they're like, well, you can't be walking on it, it's a broken ankle, so it can't be broken. Like, refuse to believe that it's broken, and then finally they do the correct scan and there's a big hole in my ankle. So it's this impact on others of our own vision of the world is so warped, we can't see others clearly either. And then for me, I've been searching for these mentors and these groups to be in and these spaces to be in where other people are like that. And I definitely found that in elite sports. And now in entrepreneurship, I'm finding it. But they're rare. And I think that's why there's so much loneliness. And it's why we run the Founders Catalyst group, because we want these opportunities and these spaces for people to get together that don't fit into normal groups. You know, when people are getting together and they're talking about sports teams and reality TV shows, and I want to be talking about how do we change the world?
Yeah.
Right? Literally want to be talking about how do we change the world? And the belief that I can do it, and the belief that I can be part of people and groups and organizations that are changing the world.
Yeah.
And I think if you have that level of perception and awareness, in your example here of the perception and awareness of, okay, I'm going to have surgery. What's that going to mean? What's the outcome of it going to be? So what do I need to do to prepare for it? The way that you're thinking about the whole thing. If you have that, I often describe to people that the world feels like it's operating through treacle. So what's that for Americans? Molasses. And it just feels everything's going so slow. And I want to get over here. Yet the impact that I can have on other people as a leader because of that is I can make them feel slow, lesser than, not smart enough, not capable enough. And this is the thing that I see with founders, is how do they adjust so that they can hold on to this massive drive that they have that is going to get them where they want to get to, and this ability to see problems, patterns, solutions that other people can't see, while bringing other people with them that don't operate at that level, but they need them as part of their team because not everybody is an entrepreneur, not everybody is a visionary genius. So how do you bring all of these people together and utilize the skill sets that they have in a way that makes them feel supported, that makes them feel valued, rather than always making them feel lesser? And definitely that was a handicap for me, is I would be annoyed you hadn't got it quick enough.
Right.
You know, I'd be annoyed that you're not doing it fast enough.
Right, and what's funny is that the work that I'm doing, as you're giving some of these examples, the work that I'm doing more and more now, working with an entire executive team, just keeps coming up more and more and more. The executive team looks at things from the entire perspective of the organization, and sometimes they get a level or two beneath them, and they go, I don't understand why they, and it's always, I don't understand why they. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to sort of land the plane of this episode now with a little bit of, okay, what can you do constructively in those moments when you hear yourself saying, I don't understand why they, or how come people don't see it like I do, for instance. And it's really simple. Something you were saying, both two things that I took from what you were saying there that I think we can just flip around and turn into questions for folks just to get really curious when they find themselves sort of stuck in these moments where I'm seeing it one way and I know nobody else around me is seeing it that way. Firstly, asking the question, how can I be understood in this moment? What do I have to do to be understood in this moment? And then secondly, what is this an opportunity for? What is this an opportunity for? So just, they're both pretty general questions, but it's an opportunity for you to start a little bit general and then hopefully over time get more and more specific as you're sort of going down this rabbit hole of curiosity and just saying, if I want to be understood right now, why is it I'm not being understood, or how can I be better understood in this moment? And to get reflective and then immediately shift into, okay, so knowing that this might be why I'm not being understood, what is this therefore now an opportunity for? What could I do? What could I do with this awareness to either better equip those around me, or as a leader, just to simply rein it in a little bit, just pull myself back a little bit and say, hey, is this a time where I actually need to sit and let others go and watch from where I'm sat, as opposed to always being the one at the front of the ship every single time?
Yeah, and there's one more thing I'd like to add to that, which is compassion. What I often see is leaders make things right or wrong, good or bad. So when they feel their team isn't keeping up with them or isn't making the right decisions, they make the person bad rather than, there's a training opportunity here. Or, as you said, there's a messaging opportunity here. How clear am I being about my message? I think I'm being clear, but if I actually stopped and said, what are you taking from this? What questions do you have? What's unclear to you? What do I need to clarify? Okay, repeat it back to me so I understand that you've got it. I see this a lot where founders are, right, bang, 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 we're going to do this. And the other people you can see in the room haven't got it yet. They're not there yet, but the founder hasn't picked up on that, or the leader hasn't picked up on that, and then they send them off to work, and the people are like, I don't really know what we're doing. I've not really got the concept, because they've not checked in, they've not been curious, and they've not explained it fully enough. Just because they get it doesn't mean everybody else gets it. Yeah. And then they go to this good and bad. Oh, they're badly. They're stupid. They don't get it. They don't care. So that's one I hear a lot, is they don't care enough. Yet my experience when I work with those people in the organization and I talk to them is they care deeply. They just haven't got it yet, or they haven't got the knowledge yet, or they haven't been coached by their leaders enough yet to understand what exactly is the most important thing. So I work a lot with founders in removing the pathology or pathologizing of good and bad to, it's my responsibility to help these people. It's my responsibility to coach them, to upskill them, or to employ the right people in the first place. I've seen founders employ people because they liked them and they made them feel good and they were cheerleaders for them, but they weren't the right people for their organization.
Absolutely. And it is funny because, when I think about this whole conversation and go all the way back to where we started, is this idea of when I look out into the world, you and I have done the work now to know that our vision of what we see as reality is different to most. And something that I've done a lot of work around is that does not make anybody else lesser than, because I see it differently. It's a huge ego issue that I see all too often in leadership. Yeah. Is it because folks don't see it the way I see it? They're somehow beneath me. They're somehow lesser than me. And that was something I held when I was an athlete. I held onto that like part of my personality. It was so detrimental at times. I look at relationships that I couldn't build because of it, all this sort of stuff. It was so detrimental for me. I've done so much work around it now to sort of see, like, again, in those moments where you notice this room is not seeing it the way I see it. And instead of assessing and judging those folks from your perspective, to welcome them in and ask the kind of questions that allow you to firstly better understand how they're seeing it, and then maybe just to have some open-ended discussions around, this is where I would like for us to see it. However, I know this is going to take time. I know this is going to take us continuing to communicate and better understand it, because something that you said there, which is such a great, powerful insight, it's like, how can I help these folks get it? How can I help these folks see a reason for this to matter? Because it obviously matters so much to me. How can I help them see why it matters as well? And suddenly now we're seeing it from, okay, I'm looking at it from my perspective, but I'm now looking at it from their perspective. And wouldn't it be fun if we can actually approach this crazy sense of reality that I have together and enjoy it and experience it in this more team environment? Because that's when we're going to actually start doing some pretty special things.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to make it very simple, because I'm going to do this in under a minute, because we're going to finish.
That's right.
It's founders understanding who they are, where they're coming from, what their motivation is, what their skill set is, and that's where you have to do the coaching, the therapy, the work, so that then you can shift perspective and go, how are other people different than me? Because if you haven't done that work, you expect everybody to think like you, and you walk around being unbelievably frustrated that other people don't think like you, instead of, okay, this is how I operate. How do other people operate? How do I meet them there? How do I get curious instead of blaming? How do I coach instead of being frustrated and being angry? And how do I see them as a human being instead of something that's getting in my way?
Love it. Good stuff. This is one of my favorite conversations. We just started in a place where we weren't exactly sure where it was going, but I think this is incredibly relatable content for any founder, for any leader, for any high performer that just knows, like, hey, I've been seeing this thing of life in my career and performance very differently for a long time. How can I maybe bring other people in and maybe even start to get a greater sense of what the true reality is around me? Good stuff, mate. Well, you were still on your game, even though you were late and you slept in. You were absolutely on your game. So just a testament to you.
Good, you've only mentioned that 3 times now.
Yeah, well, it's only passive aggressive if I do it with an attitude.
I still can't believe it.
On On that note, folks, we appreciate you. We always enjoy you joining us. And again, Lee referenced it while we were here. Head to the Founders Catalyst community on LinkedIn. We'd love to see you there. Continue to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you're sharing this with any leaders within your organization that you know can stand to hear the same sort of content that you're listening to, so you can all get on the same page. But until next time, Lee, as always, brother, pleasure.
Thank you, buddy. Cheers, friends.